3.3 major project 5, presentation and feedback. This is my reflective video. I started project 5 with the continued sample making. They'd started off as large scale in project 4 with the chainmail. And the developed ideas of chainmail, so I made a continued effort to produce larger scale pieces. These pieces then became useful to the body because I've been using the body as a platform to demonstrate the samples. They demonstrate the idea of performance, the idea of play, colour, tactility, and enjoying the large-scale final pieces to produce videos and some visual photography work. Now, this area continued. The making process has been quite lengthy, but I will say, even though the making process has taken numerous amount of hours, if I was to total the amount, you are probably looking at for at least 10 to 15 hours per piece. The one piece which displays the orange and the green and the red padded sample, that actually took 20 hours to make. So I've been making a conscious effort to keep plugging away, doing a bit at a time. So eventually they came together. And I wouldn't say there was an element of disappointment. I think it's just I'm not feeling in control of the colour palette. I'm trying to pick a colour palette that's working, but I have to bear in mind that I'm using colour palettes from the playground. And every time I come back and step back away from them, and then when I come back to them, I don't think they're as bad as they seem. The large-scale chainmail piece, the colour palette for that was determined by the materials, which was the foam fishing floats. The padded wadding was taken from a previous sample that had been made. So I'm kind of yes and no as to whether I was satisfied with them, but the idea is there with working with the idea of the Bauhaus on a three-way colour palette. The shape and the form, they definitely will attract an audience. They are definitely wearable, and they are also make a sculpture, something to hang on the wall, and I think that they do attract some interest. So moving forward, I continued also with developing the ideas with the armour, because I wanted to be seen to be doing some technical ability with the Creative Yarns in Project 4. And the reason why is because, and I know I'm still holding on to this fact, that in the presentation that I did for level 2, one of the students considered that the single bed knitting machine was possibly limited. Now, because I'm still new to knitting, I would probably say that the single bed knitting machine has made my knitting techniques more advanced. This has been a combination of learning new techniques, developing design techniques, and also making the combination of creative yarn, which I do agree with. The creative yarn does effectively make the knit along with the techniques. So I do think that I can now put the comment aside, because it has turned into a negative comment, which has become a positive for me, because I've been able to take that on board and turn it around and develop the work. And it would be fantastic if I could afford fancy yarns and creative yarns. I think this would develop the work even further. But what it has done with the limited budget, I've been able to, with the mixed media, be more selective, sorting and selective mixed media that works. I don't know whether it has been apparent up to this point, but all my mixed media is not attached through sewing onto the knitted fabric. It is actually attached to the knitting bed, and it's knitting by looping, whether it be a ring or whether it be a hook of some description. It is actually inclusive to the making. So I do want to clarify that, because I think that becomes part of the design, and it also becomes part of the technical ability as to whether it's going to work with a knitting machine. So clarifying that, I think that kind of has developed the work even further. Research has gone into more depth, and this is where I feel that I want to make the research more in depth, so that it makes my understanding of my work not only more creative, but for the audience to be able to see that I've extracted in-depth research. So continuing with the research of the couturiers and the ateliers and the fashion houses with the craft-based ideas and documentaries of design and how everything is handcrafted, I've started to gear the work and started to put in with my mixed media, how could I possibly make some of my samples a little bit more luxurious? Things like velvet, fur, metallics, metal are all relevant if used in the appropriate way. So, making a continued effort with the chainmail, I have particularly made a piece that has a little bit more refinement visually with the way that it's made. The idea is quite simple. Cotton thread was knitted. This then was overlaid with acrylic paint. This was allowed to dry. Then I again sealed it with PVA and then overlaid through this silver leaf to make the knit feel more luxury against the grey surface. This then was cut into squares, which was, the idea came from a picture of a chainmail used in a show that had been produced by Alexander McQueen. So the idea was pinched from there, and then attaching rings to the four corners and then attaching to each other and making a large scale luxury piece. I discovered that I was following the route of fashion. Chainmail was becoming art. So I particularly liked this piece, and I have particularly liked working with the idea of chainmail because it had given me a definite colour palette of various shades of grey. So I think the work at the moment is now balancing, where I'm having an area of work that is very playful, bit more colourful, and then an area of work that is a little bit more subdued, multi-tonal, more luxury. They do work together, but the one thing that I do quite like as a whole collection, which I feel does work alongside my research, at a couturier show, every piece is never the same. So I am following these lines of inquiry, which have been quite interesting because they work with my ideas, processes, my methodical cycle and my design process, where I can pick up on an idea, I can either cast one away, or I extract bits of information which are filtering through. One thing that I have noticed, information is continuously filtering through from research from 3.1, 3.2, and it's now coming back full circle to 3.3. Towards the end of Project 5, I had then reduced down my scale, and I'd focused on selecting and sorting more mixed media, and I focused on just some edges, where I'd then been able to work a lot smaller. It was a lot easier, and I produced a collection of edges which contained multi-mix media that would make those edges feel more luxurious. It didn't have to be luxurious in the mixed media, it could be lids off a tin, it could be electrical cable ties, it could be a chain, it could be a ring, it could be anything. But it was the way that it was put together and the way that it has been made, which again reflects the research of the couturier houses. Now, what this has enabled me to do has been able to set me up and prepare me for Project 6, and I think I am now at a point that I don't need to do as much research. I need to do the big interrogation board and select and sort what works and what doesn't work and what I like, to be able to put together some more final samples. I have a few ideas, and these can be seen on my blog. And also as well, I think what is really developing is my research. I've now been looking at Thom Browne, the American designer, who his work is just absolutely extraordinary. One particular area which I could make connections with, he produced a collection based on the toile or prototype, to explain to the audience that the toile is just as important as the design or the design process, and we can reference that toile to whatever we wish, whether it be embroidery, whether it be print, whether it be knit, whether it be weave. So I've held onto that as an idea, and the research has stemmed further out to designers such as Charles Jeffrey Loverboy, who again produces performance theatrical shows, and also Matty Bovan. I've been watching a few of their shows, and again, they're all very theatrical. They're all very textile based and turning textiles into performance pieces or fashion, which at the moment I am loving. But I am still steering towards Thom Browne. I like the way that he portrays the brand. When you watch the documentaries in the atelier, all the staff, and it is bizarre, they all wear grey, a grey cardigan with a grey shirt, grey shorts, everything is branded, it has structure, it's quite neat and tidy, and it almost reminds me kind of being back at school when you actually watch his documentaries. But his work is just absolutely impeccable, so I am still kind of feeding off that and extracting information from that. But also as well, I still have my favourites, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Alexander McQueen, so I'm really enjoying getting to grips with this broad array of knowledge that I'm developing, and I think that it's also connecting with the areas of dyslexia. Obviously the projects are becoming more personal because I'm putting my mark onto my work, and I think it's also generating an identity. I feel as though my work now is having an identity of a seriousness where the work is a little bit more finished and refined, and then I also bring in that playfulness, and I think this is why I don't have an objection to videoing myself in movement and performance. I think you need to get in there and be the artist when you're producing the artwork. And also as well, I think it's a good way for me visually to get my messages across to my audience. And so far, when I've been showing my work to my external audience, they all seem to get my messages that I'm trying to put across. I think now that I've approached Project 6, I think now it is time for Neil to start to pull everything together, make some still large-scale pieces. There's still a few things that are in my head that I want to have, but I also am quite liking the ideas of these smaller, refined pieces, especially the prototypes that I put together with the back braces and also the harnesses. With shoulders, and attaching some of the decorative knitwear to that, so that potentially it could become another design idea or just a piece of wearable art to be used in performance.